world of language is phenomenally complex, and to model that in a computer is phenomenally complex, but it's something people have been working on since the 50s. So the Turing test is the kind of test that says, can this machine convince me that it's human? Is it, to all intents and purposes, indecipherable from a human? And I get enormously frustrated when people stand on a stage and say, we need a world free from bias. We're here to create systems without bias. Because actually, I don't think I want to live in a world without bias. We're all driving towards personalisation, and actually, personalisation is all about bias, but it's about really intentional bias.
Hi, my name's John. Welcome to the Experience Cafe. Today I've got Clare Mortimer, Head of AI and Data for the UKI in IBM, to talk about a couple of different topics, AI, algorithms, and analytics. Clare, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So, apart from being Clare Mortimer, so who am I? I am a mum. I am a crazy but social runner, and I am really, really passionate about enabling people and organisations to get more value out of all of the data that they've got, to create better experiences, both for the people who work in the organisations who hold the data, but also for the people who interact with them.
Fantastic. And just to kind of get a little bit about insight about you, tell me 2 truths and a lie about yourself.
2 truths and a lie. Okay. So I said that I was a runner. I am a really, really crazy park runner. And I hold a course record for parkrun. I also love to bake. If you run, you can bake a lot. So,
right.
So I have been known to bake a lot, and I did bake and then transport on the tube 84 cupcakes. And I also, let's be a little bit more professional about this, I have shared a stage with both Cressida Dick when she was Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police, and Liz Truss.
Okay, interesting. And also Prime Ministerial candidate. Wow, okay. Sure, I'm going to go with 84 cupcakes in a tube as the lie.
No, I really did bake 84 cupcakes, complete with flakes sticking out the top, just to make the transporting a little harder. So we just kicked off a big program. I didn't quite have 84 people, actually. That was just how many cake cases I had, I think. But I had a team of about 60 people who were working in a basement office in Westminster, and it was the Macmillan Coffee Mornings. So, okay. So I baked cupcakes for everybody for a Macmillan Coffee Morning and took them on the tube to Westminster in those enormous blue IKEA bags.
And who have you shared the stage with if it hasn't been Liz Truss and Cressida Dick?
So I have shared the stage with Liz Truss and Cressida Dick.
Oh, so then which is the lie? The course record?
So the lie is the course record. I do run parkrun. I did run the course record parkrun, but it was my daughter's course record in the under 11s. So I'm not quite course record standard in a kind of grown-up ladies, but in the girls under 11s, we have the course record at Severn Bridge. We had 2 others as well, but she's over 11 now, and people have taken them off her, and she can't ever get them back.
Fantastic. Great. So, Clare, as I said, interested in your view. We talk a lot about data and AI interchangeably. How would you describe the difference between analytics, algorithms, and AI?
So the algorithm is just the how. It's the thing that really, and the algorithms are the AI. Artificial intelligence, which is the kind of classic definition of AI, is actually, I think it was defined as, it's the technical delivery of, it's the technical simulation of a human process, which, right, it's enormous. It could be anything, but it is the algorithm that performs that simulation. So the algorithm is the translation of that kind of human process or decision from data, and that's the thing we use to encode that in a machine.
And so, in terms of machine learning, AI, algorithms, where are organizations on the spectrum so far? I mean, you have this idea of, you look at sort of sci-fi movies and it's quite, you kind of go, oh, that's interesting. And you hear a lot of anecdotal things where I'm going, where are people generally in that journey?
So most if I look at the sort of corporate world, most organizations have got some machine learning somewhere in their system. So a chatbot, I think almost everyone's got a chatbot somewhere now. If you've got kids, they've probably built a chatbot so they don't have to respond to you anymore. But a chatbot uses natural language processing. Natural language processing is a simulation of a human capability, and that is underpinned by AI. So there's lots of those kind of language-based services which are all underpinned by AI that people are using right across organizations. That is kind of in the core and pervasive across the place. The kind of AI you see in sci-fi, the sorts of machines that pass the Turing test and really could convince me that they're human, I think they're pretty rare, and I think they're quite a long way certainly from being pervasive and from being useful, actually, at the core of what most organizations are trying to do. Not least because, we all remain as humans, and humans relate to humans, and people get nervous about interacting, I think, with something that they don't believe to be human. We've all kind of, I think, engaged with kind of corporate systems where we're never quite sure whether it's a human or a robot. Sometimes, we get a response which we're confident wouldn't pass the Turing test, and actually, then that person turns up at your door to, whether it's to read a meter or to kind of measure your kitchen, and you realise that they really are actually a human. So I think it's a bit of both. There's not simple AI at all. The world of language is phenomenally complex, and to model that in a computer is phenomenally complex, but it's something people have been working on since the 50s. But that's kind of every day. We just don't realise that that's AI. But the world of sci-fi, I think we're a way away from.
Turing Test. Can you just kind of recalibrate for folks, what is the Turing Test?
So I think if we take a step right back, most people will have heard of Alan Turing, and there's loads of work done by the Turing Institute. So the Turing Test is the kind of test that says, essentially, can this machine convince me that it's human? Is it, to all intents and purposes, indecipherable from a human? And that's the moment at which we enter the world of sci-fi, where really I don't know whether I'm interacting with a human or a machine. And for many people, that's the destination for AI. I think, really interesting challenge is to actually, as a human society, is that the AI we want?
And there's a couple of different questions that kind of pop up there that says, when something passes the Turing test, and there's been some stuff on the news that's quite topical on this point, almost does the AI have a personality? Does it have a bias? And kind of how do you moderate for that, right? What are your thoughts on? We've done a lot of thinking around this, around how do you do bias and ethics in AI, and how do you control for that?
Yeah, so there's a couple of points in response to your couple of points. But firstly, the topical stuff in the news in terms of actually, once a machine starts to potentially pass the Turing test, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Actually, does the world want to pass the Turing test? And I think we saw most recently with the Google story that actually, when somebody believed that they had created a sentient machine, actually that was very quickly kind of moved along, and the story moved elsewhere, right? So, but to your point on bias, I could talk forever about bias. I sit here as a woman in technology, breaking every bias that the system has almost. But there is an oversimplified view which says, in an AI-driven world, we need to remove all bias. And I get enormously frustrated when people stand on a stage and we need a world free from bias. We're here to create systems without bias. Because actually, I don't think I want to live in a world without bias. I don't want to live in a world where banks lend to everybody on the same basis, irrespective of the risk, because we're into a world of chaos. Actually, I don't want to be, subject to a health system which treats me in a completely unbiased way. I really want a personalised experience. In a retail context, we're all driving towards personalisation, and actually personalisation is all about bias, but it's about really intentional bias. So the opportunity with AI and machine learning is to understand the bias that we have in our history, to think intentionally about how we want to address that going forwards, and actually to create systems which consistently apply bias in the same way to create the right experience. As opposed to, right, humans, I am biased probably every day, but the decisions I make by lunchtime on a Friday are really quite different and swayed by my experiences through the week than probably what I get up and do in a much more structured and rigorous way on a Monday morning. So humans are really inconsistent. And I think AI creates a really positive opportunity for us to use bias intentionally.
And almost the intentional bias is, to your point, how you can drive personalization almost in a systematic way. Based on segmentation as well, right? And to what extent can you drive to segmentation of one personalized experience based on a set of, I guess, codified rules?
And it's a classic. I mean, so I spent a lot of time working in the health space, and you have this brilliant contradiction between, I want to be treated equally. I don't want a postcode lottery, but at the same time, I want a personalized health system. I want to be treated as an individual. I want my prescriptions to be based on my personal genetic makeup. There's a huge contradiction between those two. And similarly, I want that personalized experience, but my data is my data, and I don't want it to be available to everybody. That it's a complete contradiction. You cannot create a personalized experience without access to data. And whether it's in the health space, in the retail space, as a citizen, we all have to find a place where we're comfortable with what data is shared, how it's used, and I guess confidence in the organizations who we interact with, that they will be responsible in the way that they act with my data, so that we can all benefit from the opportunities of AI and create those really individualized, personalized experiences.
And so you touched on another great topic there that says, in order to, two things we can kind of explore here. Training the AI requires loads of data.
Yes.
And how do you get around that? How do you accelerate that learning experience of the AI and on the data that it's trained on? And then secondly, I guess, how do you get that data, right? And get permissions in a world of GDPR, in a world where you need to give consent. How are people tackling that?
Okay, so if we take the first question first, which was about training data, absolutely. You need a lot of data to train a machine. So I think one is, there's a real opportunity around interoperability and data sharing. So again, if I look at, I'll go back to my experience in the health space, right? In the health space, every hospital has a load of data, but once you get down to the specificity of, people who have similar experiences based on, similar disease sets and similar life experiences and social sets, actually in any one hospital, I start to run out of consistent data quite quickly. Whereas if all of the hospitals across the NHS in the UK, across the world, could share data, then I could much more easily build up a big enough set to start to meaningfully train AI. You can apply that into almost any industry. If you can take industry level data, you much more quickly get to the point where you've got a sufficient training set for AI. And there's a really, in industry, there's a really, again, it's another contradiction of where do I want to work together as an industry to enable all of us to advance, and where do I want to kind of almost withhold the data that I have because it creates a competitive advantage for me. So finding that balance is really interesting. But so it's about finding a way to provide access to sufficient data to allow the industry to advance, but at the same time retaining kind of that competitive advantage where my data maybe is more complete than somebody else's. So, but also then creating competitive advantage by what you do with the data and the investments that you make into the technology to advance your AI quicker than other people. So you can create more personalized experience, or whatever the outcome is. To the GDPR question, GDPR is often used as an excuse not to do things. As with all governance, right, is both an opportunity to say no, but it also creates a framework within which you can do more. So GDPR is about, my ability as an individual to understand what is being done with my data. Yes, it means I can tell you to delete all of my data, unless you happen to be the police. You're not allowed to ask the police to delete all of your data, just in case. But it actually means I need to be able to ask you what you've done with it. So it kind of requires you to do what are very natural, human and respectful things. So you have to be able to explain how you've used my data. So where have you put it? Who has had access to it? How have you used it? From an AI perspective, it means the kind of concept of a black box where I push data in and magic comes out. Actually, that's nice, but you need to be able to explain what bits of my data you have put in and why the output that comes out of it has made appropriate use. So there's what you think of as explainability, and working back through that.
And just on that point, does the way that the AI has processed the data to create the output, does the process does that need to be explainable, or is it just decisions made?
So you need to be able to explain what you've used and why you're confident that the output is fair and appropriate based on the input. You don't need to be able to explain every step in the middle. And it's interestingly, right, it's one of these places where once we start to automate things with machines, we start to look much harder at how these things are done, right? I could give you a set of information, ask you to make a decision, you'd make a decision and on we'd go. But I don't ask you, how you made that decision, John.
Because I'm human and I just...
You're human and your brain just... But actually what your brain is doing is exactly the same as a machine is doing, is it's weighing up. You're creating a whole set of hypotheses and you're weighing up which is the most appropriate hypothesis at this point in time, or the least risk for the position I'm in, or whatever it is. And you're therefore moving forward in that way. You just don't realize you're doing it. And we ask machines to explain themselves, but we don't so often ask humans to do that.
And so to your point, there's almost this expectation that AI needs to be 100% accurate, 100% perfect, and almost exceed the capability of humans before we accept it as being acceptable. And maybe actually going back to your topic earlier around conversational AI or chatbots and how we interact with it, we've seen a huge improvement in that over time, right? Where to some extent the data we've got suggests actually they perform better than human beings, right? And
because they're more consistent, right? You get the same experience night or day, one day to the next, and they're auditable as well. So if you want to go back, because your call is being recorded, actually I could tell you what would have happened before you even started because it's predictable. And
so, and it's almost that predictability, consistency, reliability, which has really driven it. And I guess you can eventually see how you get the same level of progression in different use cases or different deployments to do that. Just on a related topic, AI, there's a big fear that AI takes our jobs, right? And makes humans redundant. And we're all fearful of the moment of serendipity when Skynet takes over. Right? So I guess, what's the data say around actually the more we deploy AI, are jobs going away or?
No, actually, interestingly, there's some research which has been done in the last 6 months, which demonstrates that AI and automation is actually creating more jobs. So it's not taking jobs away. So it's because the more we can use data, the more advanced we can get in the way that we create experiences, and therefore the more human jobs we create in then taking that output from the AI and then generating the experiences. Whether it is, in the same way as Amazon closed down the high street, it's closing down the high street, but it's creating a whole raft of jobs somewhere else. And AI and automation are doing the same across a whole raft of industries. They're just moving the human role to a different place.
And I guess as in terms of the skill sets people need will change over time as well, right? Because if you're displacing, in our example, call center operators, right?
Yep.
Through AI, I guess you need a new skill set to be able to be relevant, and there's new demand. And you lead this area of the business for IBM. What are some of the skills and capabilities that we're using huge demand for?
But I think there's two sides to it. So there's the technical skills that we need to actually create the system. So there's a whole world of digital opportunity where we need we need way more people who understand how data works. They understand the maths that allows you to create these algorithms. They've got a real excitement for fiddling about with the computers and programming these things. But you also need the other bit that machines won't do is the human interface. So actually you need a whole raft more people who are very focused in the kind of customer service space, who are going to deal with those customer interactions. So it's humans interacting with humans. So it pushes, effectively what the machine is doing is pushing the people to either side. So it's occupying that kind of central processing space, but it leaves the humans to do the interaction, and it needs the humans actually to create those systems in the first place. And all of those things, yes, you need the technical skills, but they are massively reliant on the experience of humans who have run these processes to train. So you need data to train, but you also need people who really understand the processes. And spent some time this week with colleagues from one of our public sector clients talking about actually how do I get people to buy into the fact that these algorithms are trustworthy, that they can use them to make decisions. And my guidance to them is you need the people who've spent 31 years out in the field doing what they do to be in the camp training the machines. It's not just the data for the last 31 years. You need the people who've had those experiences. And we see the same in the call center space. The best people to build your call center agents in machine form are the people who've spent 30 years answering the phone. You need both them and the data. But also, if you want people to start using the systems and trusting the systems, they all trust those people who've got 30 years of experience. And if they see them engaged in the process and they see them advocating for it, that's when people really start to trust that these machines are not just there to save costs, to take jobs away, to keep up with the latest technologies. They're actually there because they're useful in doing the stuff that we've been doing well for 30 plus years in most places.
So switching things out a bit. First of all, if you're enjoying the show, please hit the like button and subscribe if you'd like to hear more. I'd like to ask you a couple of questions in terms of our quick A and B options to get get to know a little bit more about Clare. Are you morning or evening?
Morning.
Diet or exercise?
Exercise.
If you're a runner, you've got to do exercise.
I'm a runner, and I eat a lot of cake.
84 cakes apparently, yeah. Email or chat?
I think the right thing in the right place. I mean, my Gmail account would tell you there's 52,000 unread emails, so probably not email.
Okay, chat then. Okay. Yes or perhaps?
Perhaps.
Consumer Electronics Show or Wimbledon?
Wimbledon.
Disruption or transformation?
Transformation.
Cloud or GDPR?
Well, that's an interesting one. I think I'd say GDPR.
Yeah, you've got to say GDPR. You're in the
I have to say
yeah.
GDPR.
Video or phone?
Phone.
Consult or direct?
Oh, consult. You can't work in the public sector for as long as I have and not be a consult person.
Speed or accuracy?
Accuracy.
Ah, you see, yes, and I get it in your context. Sometimes it is more about accuracy and just getting things done.
Yeah, I think probably one of my personal bugbears is people who go at 100 miles an hour but don't stop and come back. Now you can go at 100 miles an hour, but you've got to come back and make sure it was right.
Maybe that's a good segue to kind of your personal learning experience. So we're often informed by some of our biggest failures, and that kind of informs us around how we want to approach things going forward. And it's a great opportunity to learn. What's one of your biggest failures, and what have you learned from that?
I should pause and say there's plenty to choose from. I think if I look at a whole collection of places where things haven't gone the way I'd have liked them to, I would say I've often been rapid to walk away from things. I can be quite impatient. So I think, when I moved into a new space, I won't go into specific clients because I spend so much of my time in the public sector, I have to be a little bit mindful. But having gone into a new space where there was masses of opportunity, they've got so much data, it was super exciting, and you could change the world. And I had some amazing conversations with lots of people who had lots of enthusiasm. But the public sector process can be slow and it takes time. And I walked away from a client space where there was huge amounts of stuff to do because I didn't have the patience to wait for them to get their act together. And they've done some really, really, really amazing stuff since I walked away. And I'm gutted that I walked away. So what's my lesson from that? Well, one is I have to sometimes just be more patient. But the big lesson for me is what I did was I didn't quite take my toys and go home, but I walked away and I dropped myself totally into something else. And the right thing to do, and what I have done much better since then, is to stay in touch. And to acknowledge that all of that opportunity that I could see, all of the stuff that they could do, all of the problems that they had were still problems, even though they couldn't get their act together. And then to just find the time to stay in touch. I've consistently been too good at just moving on.
And it's interesting because we were talking to one of your colleagues, Phil Spring, about sustainability and how one of his reflections is how do you bring people together and bring them along the journey of change, which typically is
that takes time.
Yeah, and staying engaged with people to kind of drive that change and make it happen. And I guess if I just think about all the problems we're trying to deal with and specifically in public sector, right? If you see, we just had a massive pandemic. We kind of got all sorts of other issues to deal with. We've got climate change and the things we need to drive. How do we orchestrate people and get them engaged? Because you've got the data, right? We've got the technology.
So we kind of have, and the pandemic's a really good example, where like said it was the ecosystem that solved the pandemic. Right? No one organisation, no one individual actually enabled us as a country, as individuals, to survive the pandemic. It was the collective and the way everybody came together and just made things happen. And to tie that back to my experience of actually trying to stay in touch, part of staying in touch is also acknowledging that it's not just me that has to stay in touch with everything all of the time, and I can use connections into other organisations to stay in touch with what's going on. So I think everything we do now is about actually how we do things together. Through the pandemic, everybody dropped everything and just turned up and worked as one team with a common goal. And I think that's the thing is finding the common goal, whatever the common goal is, having a common goal, and then actually focusing on that goal, not worrying about, well, I work for this organization or that organization. My job is to do this, my job is to do the AI. So I'm going to build the AI. Actually, I can build all the AI I want. But if nobody else is building the data pipelines, I'm never going to be able to actually embed that into a process. If nobody is working out how that output of the AI gets taken and used, all I'm doing is building really smart maths, which is kind of fun up to a point, but I don't play in the space I'm in. I don't do this kind of job. I don't spend my time really talking to the people who've got big world problems to build clever maths.
Yeah, it's about getting that maths to do the right thing and get an impact, right? And
it's about making sure you've asked the right question in the first place, so you're directing all of your smart maths in the right way.
Right problem.
Yeah.
So maybe on that note, maybe to end, what's the biggest top couple of problems that you're working on or that you think we need to solve over the next couple of years?
So I think we need to get our heads around some of the contradictions that exist. So I think one thing we need to get over is really deciding what we trust and how we build trust between whether it's a citizen or a consumer and an organization. We've had lots of experiences of things that have gone wrong in the trust space, where people have done things they shouldn't have done, whether shouldn't talk out of school about whether Google have misused your information to give you the wrong ads, or more significantly in other places, organizations have taken my data and used it inappropriately. And that's not different, right? We've all had phone calls, have you had an accident which wasn't your fault? That's the same misuse of data, just in a different place. So if we're really going to take advantage of all of the cool stuff you can do with AI, we have to, I think, regain the respect, but find a way to respect people's data and to use it sensibly. So get over our enthusiasm for doing cool stuff and just think about how we're using it. So the real focus on trust. I think the other big problem, I think you told me I was going to have to come up with 3, I'm only going to give you 2, but the other big problem is how do we create a workforce who are engaged in the technology space, particularly in AI, who is really representative of the community that we want that AI to serve? Because in the same way as, I would want to interact, generally people like to interact with people who look like them. Actually, we want people to be building the machines who've got a set of experience which is representative of the world that they're going to have to interact in. So I think we've done loads to increase the diversity of the people who work in this space. And as a technology industry, people spend gazillions of pounds and loads of time investing in encouraging more people. But we have to keep that up, because if you look at the population who work in this space, it is not representative of our kind of broader population and the communities where this can be really, really valuable.
Fantastic. So you got 2. I'll give you a pass on the third one.
Thank you.
But thanks, Claire. It's been fantastic talking to you. And I wish you all the best in terms of the problems that you're solving. And hopefully we'll speak again soon.
Thank you.